Welcome to week 4 of Entrepreneurial Operations, launching a startup. This week, we discussed some of the risks that can come into play when launching a venture. We discussed startup risks, such as launch delays and budget overruns, and we also discussed scale-up risks, such as having insufficient venture operating capacity or suffering from low venture profit margins. In order to eliminate the risk of launch delays, it is important that you develop a startup launch project plan for your venture. This, of course, will include all the activities and tasks that you have to complete from the moment you conceptualize your idea till the moment you're able to launch the venture in the marketplace. It's really critical to have a clear understanding of how long this will take, not only for your own personal and internal planning, but also to create a sense of credibility with your customers and your funders and other stakeholders. The second challenge that we discussed was the challenge of having startup budget overruns. This, of course, occurs because the startup expenses and operating costs that we incur prior to generating revenues exceed the funds that we have raised. So it's really critical that before we even launch the venture, we sit down and carefully consider and develop a startup launch budget. And that, of course, will form the basis as we pitch to vendors, funders, and stakeholders as our ask for the funds that we need to raise. After discussing some of the startup risks which we can encounter prior to launch, we then went on to discuss some of the scale-up risks which we may face after the launch. In particular, we first discussed the idea of insufficient venture operating capacity, and this is really critical. So now we've had a wonderful idea, we've successfully launched in the marketplace, and what we hope, of course, is that the business will grow and succeed. So in order to capture that market opportunity, we of course have to have the venture capacity to sustain our customer demand. And we've been using the value chain canvas as a way of kind of methodically thinking through different stages of our value chain. So as you even think about your scale-up capacity, you want to think about, do I have enough capacity in terms of my resources and my sourcing strategy? Do I have enough capacity in my production process, whether that's a manufacturing or service production process? Do I have enough capacity to move my products and services throughout my distribution channels? And do I have the capacity in my maintenance and post-sales operations to sustain good customer service? So we want to look at our scale-up capacity throughout the entire value chain to ensure that indeed we have sufficient venture capacity to meet our rising and exponentially hopeful customer demand. Finally, we talked about venture risk in terms of low profit margins. So at this point in the conversation, we were looking at the various cost drivers, where are operating costs, and in terms of marginal operating costs, can we sustain the price in the marketplace that we have set? So whether you're a for-profit or a non-profit venture, on an ongoing basis over the long term, it is important that your incoming revenues, funds, grants, etc., are able to cover your operating expenses and costs. So that's a conversation we had here. And again, you can use a value chain, and we did use a value chain as a way to kind of think through at each stage in the value chain, what are your critical cost drivers and how can you improve on your marginal costs throughout your value chain and your operation. So kudos and congratulations. By completing the assignments and conversations in week 4, we're actually drawing to the close of our Entrepreneurial Operations Launching a Startup course. And I'll just close by getting us back to where we started, which is the operation startup value chain, and looking at the 4 stages of your value chain: source, produce, deliver, and maintain. So as we close out week 4, I'll return to the startup operations value chain canvas that I had introduced in week 1. And as I had said at that time, the value chain canvas is just really a wonderful way to consider and craft an operations plan for your venture. I also said at our introduction that I thought that for startup success, we have 3 critical C's for startup success: customers, capability, and cash. And so as you look at the operations value chain canvas, you'll see that those are 3 of the main conversations that we do in fact have. We start off by asking the question, who is our customer? How can we craft a succinct value proposition that clearly states how we offer value in the marketplace? How can we operationalize that value proposition into our customer satisfaction goal? And based on that value proposition, what do we estimate to be the customer demand for this product or service in the market? Once we've clearly understood the customer and customer demand, then we take a look at our operations through the lens of the 4 stages of the value chain canvas: source, produce, and deliver and maintain, and ask ourselves, do we have the capabilities to deliver on our products and services that we've promised in our value proposition statement to our customers. What are all the activities and processes we'll have to undertake? Perhaps we may have to consider partnerships. How will we know we are being successful? What are the key performance indicators that will determine and indicate this? What is our capacity and what are our critical cost drivers? So if you've really thought about that throughout these 4 weeks, you really have a clear understanding of, do you have the operations capability to deliver on what you have promised through your value proposition in the marketplace? And then as we close out week 4, we really looked kind of back through those 4 stages of the value chain to ask, where in the value chain might I have a situation that incurs a startup or a scale-up risk? So if you've done all the activities and assignments in week 1 through 4, really you have a value chain canvas that provides you a roadmap to think about your operations and really ensure that you're set up for success.